Okay.
I brought some props,
Okay.
just in Ellen's honor.
Oh, thank you.
A couple of genuinely creepy dolls.
Dolly Parton before she grew up.
And this one is one of my favorites.
Oh,
Because
They always
his
move.
eyes move.
They follow you around whether you like it or not.
And I thought that we'd start off with the specific and move to the general. There, that's more fun. And then after we've gotten really general, we'll open the discussion for questions. So think about what you might want to ask Ellen.
Mic closer.
Can you hear me?
No.
Okay. Now, can you hear me? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, the specific is more in tune with what are you actually working on? What's coming out that's not out yet?
Okay.
And what are you putting together?
Okay. Right now, in about 2 weeks, the best horror of the year, number 5, is finally coming out. Some of you may know that there were problems with. Can you hear me?
No.
Some of you.
Into the mic.
Is that better? Can I hold it?
Yeah, if you want to hold it, please do.
If I can get it out. All right, tell me if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Good, okay. All right, finally, after a delay, because of Nightshade being acquired by Skyhorse Books, the Best of Horror of the Year, number 5, is coming out in the next 2 weeks or so. From Skyhorse, but it's Nightshade's still an imprint of it. And it's on, you can pre-order it. The ebook is actually out already. That was accidental because Amazon doesn't know what they're doing, and neither did the publisher at the time, who had just acquired everything. But anyway, the ebook's available, and the pre-order for the paperback should be, well, the pre-order's now, and they told me the books will be in the warehouse in like 2 weeks. So that's what has just come out, or will be. I've just finished Lovecraft's Monsters, which is coming out which is a reprint anthology with one original by John Langan. It's coming out from Tachyon next year, I think next February or March. That's all reprints. And that will have illustrations of Lovecraft's monsters. You know, each person is supposed to take, the stories that I chose had at least something from an actual Lovecraftian creature or monster that was mentioned by a Lovecraft, either by Lovecraft or someone he worked with. This year, the books that are just out are Hauntings, which is a reprint anthology from Tachyon of ghost stories and haunted house stories, Queen Victoria's Book of Spells, which is gaslamp fantasy, which is not exactly steampunk, although there is some steampunk in there, but it's basically Victorian fantasy. I'm sure I missed, Telling Tales. Telling Tales is the 30th anniversary anthology that I put together for Clarion West, and it's all reprints by writers who were in Clarion and who were in Clarion West, and each person who was a student who's in the book, one of their former teachers wrote something about them or their story. Okay. And those are for sale here. They just came out. They're beautiful. They're hardcover and paperback. I'm working on Fearful Symmetries, which is a Kickstarted anthology that's all horror, original horror. And one of the few books that is an open market, or was an open market, because I don't usually do original anthologies that are open markets. And it's coming out sometime next year from Chizine.
Why did you do it as an open market?
So we can get more people enthusiastic about it, basically. I said I would do it only if I didn't have to read the slush, and we got 1,081 submissions. And so basically Sandra Castori and Brett Alexander Savory, he's not reading them, but Sandra's been reading them. They have a couple of readers. Actually, Lisa Kresenstein from Australia volunteered, and I think she's read some. And they're passing on some of the stories to me. I mean, the ones that they think I should look at. So, and they're hopefully catching up in the next week or two with everything. I don't know how many they've read already, and they've passed on a few to me that I've either read or not read or will read or whatever. And we wanted to keep 2 open slots for stories that came in through that process. So that's one. It was basically because it was a publicity gimmick, you know.
Is that a rough idea of what a new writer's chances are? 2 in 1,000?
No, and that's what people are asking on Facebook, but it's not like, someone's saying, oh, it's like winning the lottery. No, it isn't, because if you write well enough to get the attention of the readers, then they'll pass it on to me. So it's really based on talent as much as anything else. So yeah, I mean, in fact, there's some stories I put aside that I probably will take, but I don't want to make that commitment until I've read all the ones that are passed on to me, because I think it's only fair to do that. So it's a long shot, but so what? You know. Oh, what else am I working on?
Yeah.
I'm just finishing up a reprint movie horror anthology for Tachyon. I don't know when it's coming out. I mean, it's due now, and I'm thinking, well, Lovecraft Monsters is coming out in February, so I was like, wait a minute, I don't have to have it in this, I can't have it in this fast. You know, and I'm struggling with the intro, which I always struggle with for the intros for my anthologies.
I think seeing probably arguably the best known short story editor in the country say, I can't have it done this fast. Oh my God, no, it can't be due this one.
Yeah, well,
it's an example to all of you that you're not alone.
You're not alone missing deadlines. I used to be very good at making deadlines, but last year I couldn't sell any anthologies at all. This year I sold like 4, 1 reprint, and I tried to stagger when everything's due, but you kind of mess up And also then I had Clarion at 85 stories plus to read, to skim at least from Clarion. So I forgot that part, you know. So, you know, so I said to Tachyon, Jill, who is the, I guess, production person at Tachyon, do you really need this in, like, by August? And I said, because, I mean, the stories are all in, but I haven't started the intro, and you know how agonizing that is. I did send her the story so they can put it into copy editing, or proofreading at least. But you always forget certain things that are happening in your life that, oh, I can't get that done now because I'm going on 500 trips in 3 weeks. Things like that. So, yeah, I'm a little overloaded with reading. Right? And the rest of the year I'm very behind. Number 6 I'm kind of behind on.
So is that your to-do list to this
point?
Read. Yeah.
Basically.
Now I had a thought there, and
you lost it?
Escaping me.
It'll come back.
I guess. I wanted to point out.
Oh, I'm reading for Tor.com, but I mean I'm sorry, but the thing is, I'm not reading their slush pile. I'm not an open market, so to speak. I only have a few slots. I mean, I'm one of the 4 readers for Tor.com. I mean, by reader I don't mean slush reader. I mean people who are soliciting. Patrick Nielsen Hayden, Liz Gorinsky, both regularly. I don't read buy stories for it. Ann Vandermeer and I are both freelance, but actually any editor at Tor can bring in a story. So, I mean, they've expanded the market, and they've expanded it to like 1 new story a week, when it used to be more reprints and excerpts, and now it's more original, and that just started, which I didn't even realize. I mean, that only started like several months ago. I thought they were doing regularly
Everything
original
I've
stuff.
had up there has been new. And
When did you start publishing with them?
Years ago.
But I think not that much. I mean, what I mean is they weren't. Because I was looking back because I wanted to nominate Irene Gallo as the art director of Tor.com. She's doing gorgeous work there.
Yeah.
And when I was looking back to see, well, how long has she been doing it? The original, because they didn't do original art for reprints or excerpts.
They did original art for
new things.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
But so that's how I was trying to judge, and I realized last year she didn't do that much original art, which meant to me that they didn't publish that much, certainly not every week, that's all I mean, that they expanded it, and now every week there's an original. I'm glad I'm not doing that, I mean, because I did that for sci fiction, and boy, publishing a new story every week is like very exhausting. Especially when you don't really have a traffic manager. I mean, with Tor.com, I don't have to schedule things. We have someone who actually schedules it. All I have to do is hand in the edited story, and then a few months later I'll be getting the copy edit to go over with the author like overnight, which is not so great. But that's it. It's not like I have to schedule anything.
So can people send things directly to you, or do they have to send them in?
They have to send them to the slush pile. I mean, but they got more readers. They hired more people, and I think they're much less. They used to be like a year behind, and now I think they're maybe 2 months behind. So no, I mean, I'm not really. I don't have that much I can buy, so I don't want everyone to send me stories, unfortunately.
Yeah, it drowns you.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. I mean, that's why, I mean, when people say, why don't you have open markets for your anthologies? Well, certainly for theme anthologies, one of the reasons is, no, I do not have a reader, I do not want 1,000 manuscripts. But the other thing with a theme anthology, okay, let's say 1,000 people send in a story on a particular theme. I'm only taking 20 of those stories. That means there are 880 stories of the same theme floating around. It kind of dissipates the whole theme of your anthology.
The famous marshmallow invasion stories that Gardner had everybody
Did
write.
he really?
Yes, at Clarion.
Oh. So that's why with Fearful Symmetries I was willing to do that, because it's a non-theme anthology. So I don't mind having people, having an open market for a little. It was open for 30 days. And we got over 1,000 in 30 days.
Well, from your description of what you're doing, what I'm seeing is a real difference, a real change in what the short story markets are at the top of the ladder. Because you are the top of the ladder. And what I'm seeing from what you just said is some tour-level professional publishers, some small presses, some small presses, some ebooks. I'm seeing a real spread of things rather than, you're no longer editing a magazine, and that means something in terms of there not being a market there for you to edit, right?
Well, in the way, that's why Tour.com was such a joy. I mean, the great thing about Tour.com, I can basically do what I want. I mean, Eileen, who's the graphic, she's the art director for Tour. She's the one who's in charge of the whole website, which is kind of odd. You'd think it would be an editorial person, but Irene's the one who hired me. And she basically said, I said, well, I was nervous actually. I said, I don't want to step on Anne's toes, Anne Vandermeer, because she was hired as a freelancer several months before me. I said, well, aren't you worried that we'll want to buy the same thing? And she said, nah. I'm like, okay. And I said, well, do you want me to buy science fiction? What do you want me to buy? And she said, whatever you want. And I said, well, I'd like to bring in some more horror, and I'd like to actually edit science fiction again. I haven't been editing science fiction for a long time, and I'd like to, but it's really hard getting it, especially because I haven't edited science fiction in so long. People are not sending me science fiction. The writers who I would talk to and said, hey, write me some science fiction stories, and I would get fantasy or dark fantasy, which are great, and I buy them. But, I kind of wouldn't mind having a few science fiction stories and editing science fiction again.
Are you taking notes? Really, everybody should be listening to this. Make Ellen happy.
Make me happy, yeah. So, but I mean, I basically can, and at a certain point, about 3 months ago, Irene said we needed to slow down buying. And the thing is, when you're starting out in any venue, editing, it takes a while for people to start sending you stuff. You kind of have to nag them because they're not used to you as a market. Again, you have to start from scratch almost. And so I was asked, sent out an email to, 20, 30 writers who I've worked with and say, hey, I'm a market now, send me some stories. And then they start coming in, and they're really good, many of them. And, well, I mean, the ones I buy are. No, and then I was just worried I was buying too many. Oh, and I can buy novellas, which is very nice. They were happy to have novellas. But I was afraid I was buying too much. And then Irene did say, stop buying, everybody. And I said, okay. I was like, oh no, I have to tell you, I'm not buying the second.
Ellen has overloaded us. Everybody else has to stop buying the stories.
No, it wasn't just me, everyone. And then about a month later, I said, well, there's this really good story I want to buy. How long do I have to wait? And she said, that was just a glut in the production line. You can go ahead and buy everything. I mean, everyone bought. But now we're scheduled through April or May next year, and 3 stories in a row in April are mine. So now I'm getting nervous again because I have these stories waiting for me. But once I published a few other people, they're writing me really great second stories. Like, okay, I want to buy your story. It's like, but I'd like to buy some new people too. So if I had to do it all myself, I could buy lots of stories, and I'd be much more open to people, just sending me stuff. If I had a reader, I mean, the thing is, yes, I'm open to stories, but no, I don't want to read 100 stories a week. So if I was in that situation, I would try to get someone who I trusted to pass things on to me.
Well, do you see a change in how stories are being published and how they're being marketed with your experience with Kickstarter to publish a book? And that seems to me to be is sort of the opposite of traditional publishing. And you're a major editor. Chizine is not they're a small press, but they're not a startup press or anything.
I mean, I went to Kickstarter deliberately for Fearful Cemeteries, because I knew that I couldn't sell another non-theme horror anthology. Every non-theme anthology, I've done one horror Inferno, one science fiction and fantasy, the Delray book of science fiction and fantasy, and one fantasy, Salon Fantastique with Terry. They tanked. All three of them tanked. Inferno won most of the awards in the field. Salon Fantastique, I think, won the World Fantasy Award. But they don't sell. So I knew damn well I was not going to be able to sell another non-theme anthology to anyone. So it just occurred to me, and people were doing Kickstarter, and there was some anthologies and magazines, like, gee, I wonder if I should try to do an anthology that way. But I certainly wasn't going to publish it. I mean, most people who are doing Kickstarter proposals seem to be publishing everything themselves. Well, I had no desire or interest or ability to do that. I wanted to do it with somebody. So I was at World Fantasy, I think it was, or maybe it might have been the Worldcon, I'm not sure. And I was wandering around the dealer's room, and it just occurred to me, I was talking to the people at Chizine, and would you be at all interested in doing, they didn't even know what Kickstarter was, I don't think. I said, would you be interested in doing a Kickstarter to, anthology with me? And he said, yeah, well, let's talk about it. Well, we're still working on the contract because we forgot to we've been working on the contract since September with this different contract. It's more I'm a partner, and it's hell. I mean, it's like, we've got to I have all the money in my account, so they don't get anything until we finish the contract, but I really want that money out of my account by the end of the year. But yeah, there are things that you don't realize when you're doing Kickstarters. First of all, I do not think it's a business model. Everyone was asking me after we had a successful Kickstarter, is that a business? What? You tell us how to do this? Is this a great business? I said, it's not a business model, it's a kickstart. It means it's to start something and then you do it yourself. It's a business, you start a business. That's how I feel it is, anyway. I have no intention. There are people who are doing issues of magazines, and I don't know how long it's going to sustain itself to do, okay, we're going to do a Kickstarter for this magazine issue every 3 months or every 6 months. I can't believe that's sustainable. But maybe it is. I mean, it'll be interesting.
Well, how successful has the Kickstarter campaign been?
Well, for me, it was successful. We asked for, we needed 25,000, and we figured out exactly what it was all for. And boy, did I get slammed and Chizine on I forget Matt Schwartz's Shock Lines bulletin board. Some guys came out of the woodwork and saying, why are you doing this, and why you only need $3,000 to put together a book, to produce a book. I think, yeah, if you want to do it crappily, sure. This is like professional. I mean, we figured out how much to pay the artist. We figured out what the money, and for marketing and printing and everything. And how much I wanted to pay the writers. I wanted to pay them at least 6 cents a word, and we actually made enough to pay 7 cents a word, and I knew how much I needed to make it worth my while. I wanted $6,000, and that's what that was part of the whole thing. We were lucky that we actually made over 25. We made 28 something because we forgot to add in the cost of the Kickstarter and Amazon. So we actually ended up with 25,000, but we wouldn't have if we had only gotten 25,000. And we just did the Kickstarter for KGB, which is enormously successful. KGB, the reading series in New York, we asked for 3,000, which was low, which would have kept us going for about 2 years, maybe, minus the money we would have had to pay PayPal and Amazon. And we ended up with over 8,000, which means we can run it. It'll be run for 5 years. I mean, we don't have many expenses for that, but we pay a stipend to the readers. We pay the bartenders a tip. The drinks are free, and we take out the writers and their partners for dinner. So it's usually about $150 a month, and we pay for our own dinners, basically. So we figured that we need about $1,500 a year. So That was very successful. I mean, that's a really good fundraiser. We would have used Indiegogo for that, but you're not allowed to have more than a certain number of premiums. It was a limited thing, and we didn't know that. It's like, okay. It's like, no, we want to have a lot of premiums. You know? So Kickstarter's interesting, and I've supported some Kickstarters, all the different weird kind, including technology, pens, weird pens and flashlights, and some weird tool. And I've only gotten cheated once. I mean, I was supporting a glass blower who wanted to do a studio, and he never sent me my vase, bastard. You know, and I harassed him for a little while. And I don't want to get arrested for harassment, but he's online as a bastard. And I keep saying, "Where's my thing? You promised me the premium." You know, but what can you do? You know, that's the downside of Kickstarter. There's no recourse if someone doesn't send out the thing it was supposed to send you. You know, there's no policing really.
Well, why is it that people will not buy enough copies of the anthology to make it worth the publisher's while, but they'll give you over $25,000 to publish the anthology?
Beats me. I don't know. There are about 700, I think 600 people supported it. Well, I think 700, but 600 actually want the book, either the ebook or the print book. So what's interesting, it's almost like a subscription service in advance, which is what people did in the old days, I mean really, really old days, you know, this 18th century. They would sell a certain subscription of their books and then they would print them. And that's kind of what Kickstarter is in this sense. And we know we have a certain amount of books not pre-sold because they're not sold. We have to send them out. And then we'll probably do another couple of thousand, 2,000 or 3,000, I don't know, whatever they think they can sell when they go to retailers. You know, it'll be a regular marketing type thing.
Because 600 people buying your book is
well, it's not enough to make
successful.
No,
book.
It's not. But we didn't have to spend any money on it. I mean, that's
right.
That's also the discussion I have with Chizzy and why it should be 50-50 rather than why should they get, you know, it's not like the publisher-author situation, it's a partnership. They didn't put any money in either. You know, it's not like usually the publisher gets money and you have an advance against royalties. Well, anyways, it's complicated, but I got a lawyer who's helping me for free. So thank God. You know?
Do you think this is something you'll want to continue to do? Do you think it will? No?
No. It's hard work. I mean, you have to get the premiums, I hate nagging people. And it's for 30 days you have to nag people to support me, give us money, please, please. I don't have to do that for KGB for another 5 years. I'm so happy, you know, and I know I don't want to do it. You know, it's bad enough you have to kind of half nag people, buy my book, please. But to, you know, say, hey, would you support us so we can publish the book? No, I don't want to do it again. I'd rather have a publisher buy my book and just do that part. I don't want to have to be involved in that area. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why I went with a publisher, though, who would be doing the publicity and marketing. I mean, I see a lot of Kickstarters that don't ask for much money. They're actually doing everything themselves, which means they have to sell the book themselves. They don't have they don't have a distributor. I'm presuming they don't have distributors. And that's much harder to do, and it's harder to sell a good number of copies. So I'm not even sure how successful, when those books that are doing very low price Kickstarters and publishing themselves, I don't know if they're actually getting published, you know, exactly. We'll see how that goes.
Well, I wanted to do, we have a limited amount of time before the bookstore starts. I wanted to move on to the dolls and to the uncanny, and to the uncanny valley, which does everybody know what the uncanny valley is?
I didn't. You had to tell me.
Okay. Are the people who don't know? Okay. Enough people that I should tell you. Okay. The uncanny valley is a hypothesis in the field of aesthetics about it, and it's usually applied to people who are doing gaming or anime or robotics. It didn't start in robotics, but it quickly became important in robotics. And it refers to the fact that as you create a simulacrum of a human specifically, the closer you get to looking at like a human, the more people are affectionate to it, they like it, up to a certain point. And there is a point after which it's creepy. And then you can recover from that. That's why it's a valley. after a certain more amounts of credibility are added, it stops being creepy, and you like it even more than you liked the big trash can with the eyes. You know? And it's, to me, it's an extensible concept. It's usually applied to visual things, such as movies and anime and games, but it can be applied to writing too, I think. And what's the point at which you're writing? And it's usually referred to, because this is something that's, it's popular with people who are trying to do mass marketing. So people want to avoid the uncanny valley, or they want to avoid falling into it too deeply. I actually like to go for the uncanny valley. And I think Ellen is like the uncanniest of editors. She collects the doll heads. She's a photographer who has an eye for the uncanny. So I wanted to just talk about, yeah.
Well, you know, I am actually doing my doll, I am doing a horror doll anthology. I will admit to it. And this was a proposal that I had floating around, that I've been wanting to do it for years, but I couldn't get the right title. And without a title, that kind of book is like, I had no idea how to sell it. So finally, Veronica Shanos came up with a title that I could live with, The Doll Collection. And I actually sold it to Tor, to Jim Frankel. And he immediately wanted to change the title to something else. I said, why? And he said, because no one at Tor wants doll in the title. I was like, okay. I was like, okay, so give me some ideas. So he came up with Smiling Faces, which worked okay for me. I was fine with that. And that way we could make it a little broader and didn't have to be doll. I mean, well, the doll thing also would be mannequins, puppets, voodoo, all kinds of dolls, not just your typical dolls like that, but everything I wanted to cover. But with Smiling Faces, I could also expand it to images, things with images on them. Well, Jim Frankel's now gone from Tor, and my new editor is Liz Gorinsky, who is the editor for Queen Victoria. And she said, I hate smiling faces. It's like, I said, well, why don't we do something with doll? I said, well, Jim told me that no one at Tor liked to use the word doll. I said, you know, whatever you want. You know, let's talk about it. I'm open. You know, sure, I don't care.
So this is going to be visual and text?
No. I mean, the idea would be great, and originally I talked to Jim about that, but it probably would be too expensive, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, Ellen Clay just wanted to volunteer photographs. I could do the photographs myself. I think, actually I forgot, I haven't really had a good talk to Liz about the whole process, the whole project, so I will maybe mention it, that we would love to have photographs. I would love to have photographs if it's not expensive to be able to do that with decent printing, and I have a feeling it will be. So I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what the title is going to be at this point.
Do you have an idea of what it is in the uncanny that attracts you? Is there a point at which you're very interested in something? Why?
No. I have no idea.
No theory of Ellen here.
No, I mean, people ask me, you know, why do you like this? I don't know. I do collect doll heads, doll parts, and some people, I have been sent things that I don't like. I mean, for a while, I like three-faced dolls, and I was an eBay junkie. I had been an eBay junkie in various collectibles. I have collected many stupid things. I am Ellen, an eBay junkie. But at one point I was collecting three-faced dolls. There aren't that many variations, actually. There are only about 5, at least that I could find on eBay, and I bought them all. I ended up with one. I stupidly did not check the dimensions. I mean, I assume most of them they're that high. You know, they're little. I got one. It's like this big. She was ugly. I mean, it's like, oh God, no. It's like, I originally got rid of her. I don't know what happened to her, but it's like, no. I mean, she wasn't ugly and repellent, but it's like, no, I don't want this 3-foot doll with 3 faces on it. I want little ones. So, I mean, that's not exactly the same thing, but I do reject even things that I reject subcategories of things that I collect. I like Cupid dolls a lot. I think they're adorable.
But they're not uncanny.
No, they're not. Well, they can be due to my series of photographs of them.
Okay. I mean, this is an uncanny.
Yeah, this one's. I have some really good ones with no eyes.
Yeah,
those are beautiful. I have one of them. I think on one of my accounts. I used to have it on maybe Twitter. or maybe I put the hairs, the March hairs, I don't remember. But I did have, on one of my social things, I have one of my photographs of a doll. It's a black and white photo, it's a white doll, and she has, well, I don't know why I say she, but it has no eyes. But there's a, and this was not intentional, there's a paper clip next to it. It's like, oh, I'm so neat in my house, you know, I did a paper clip in that picture. But it works.
Well, I think the dolls without eyes are creepy.
They are, but I
those
love
old,
them.
Those old, well, yeah, you like creepy things.
I'm trying to think of things that are creepy that I don't like. I'll think about it. There must be
Especially those old metal dolls where the eyes didn't survive, but the metal dolls did from the 19th century.
I don't have many of those.
And they're pretty creepy no matter what condition they're in because the eyes are gone. But the other thing is that eyes all by themselves, dolls'
I have some of those
are
too.
really creepy.
Oh, I think
Because
they're
they got
beautiful.
little sticks.
I have those. I don't think they're creepy at all. I think they're really pretty.
Well, that's the other side. That's the other side of the uncanny valley. Is if you spend enough time in the uncanny valley, you get used to it, and you don't think it's creepy anymore.
All right. I don't think I ever found it creepy. Some people said they could never live in my apartment because there were too many faces in it.
Yeah.
And they're not. I mean, it is. It's not. And I never
William
noticed.
Gibson is genuinely creeped out by your dolls.
Really? But it's not only the dolls. Apparently, I never noticed, but I have a lot of images, facial images, not just dolls. And I like, really? And I had to look around. I was like, do I? Maybe. Yes, I have many mechanical.
You have mask-like things.
Yes, I do. I have the Jack in the Box like Charlie Brown had that was made by Richard Herman. I wish it wasn't. It actually popped up. It does. It's a fake Jack in the Box. It's this evil-looking rabbit. I have a few evil-looking rabbits. Both of them. One was a gift from Mikey Rosner Herman. That's on his hanging on the wall.
But I doubt very much that anyone could sell you a story about an evil-looking rabbit.
It really depends on the story. I will never say never. You know, I could say I hate zombie stories and someone will come up with a great zombie story. So I will never say you cannot sell me a story about an evil rabbit. It depends on the story. I mean, that's what the joy of fiction is. You know, no matter how stupid an idea sounds in summary, if you can create a great story around it, you're a genius.
Well, you have your assignment.
How many rabbit stories?
How many rabbit stories can Ellen take before she cracks?
I mean, Donnie Darko is one of the creepiest, rabbit stories. Talk about rabbits.
I think we'll throw this open to questions from the rest of us.
I will. So, Ellen, you had edited all kinds of anthologies, like theme anthologies, non-theme anthologies. Do you have like a favorite kind of book that you edit, and what's your like favorite book you edited and worst?
Oh, well, I say I don't like fantasy that much, but it's not really true, but I love horror, I love editing horror anthologies. Some of the anthologies that I thought have worked the best are the ones that I started out doing, which were half reprint and half original. But that was because there were stories that I loved, there were stories that I remembered in the theme, like when I did Blood Is Not Enough. You know, I said I had all these stories that I had loved, and I could say, okay, I want to do vampirism. That works. So it was interesting picking out the what I consider classics, and then commissioning new ones. So that was fun. I don't do that much anymore. I mean, usually now it's either all original, or reprint. But I kind of liked doing a mix sometimes. But it's harder, I think, for the publisher to sell. They usually want an all original one. And then also the thing is, if you're getting paid for a reprint one, you can't afford to do originals, because a reprint I can pay a penny a word for originals. I'm not going to do that. I would never do that. Although for the original story in my Lovecraft's Monsters anthology, John Langdon really wanted to do it, so I think I paid him 2 cents a word for an original, which, I said, are you sure? I said, I can't pay you more than, this. And if it's over 10,000 words, I can't pay you more than, But he wanted it. He was very late. He's apologized in his afterward. It was supposed to be my birthday present in December. I think he handed in like 4 months late. It's like, but I mean, I don't have a favorite. that would be like choosing my child, my favorite child, or my least favorite child. Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Did you have a question?
Oh, well, Ellen, you collect dolls and doll parts, and Eileen has a smattering of dolls and doll parts. And Ellen Klages has an alarming collection of dolls and doll parts, and you have to kind of push the eyeballs aside to get to sleep in her guest room. Does Ellen Kushner collect dolls?
I don't know if I don't think so.
Everybody whose name begins with E collects dolls and doll parts.
Well, there are other Ellens. I don't think Ellen Asher does. I don't think Ellen, the one in ReaderCon, what's her last name?
Ellen Brody.
Ellen Brody. I don't, as far as I know, she doesn't collect it. So there are actually a few Ellens who I believe do not. I've been to Ellen
They're
Kushner's
not
house.
really Ellens.
They're fake Ellens. You have to be.
The initiation yet?
Good evening, Shoppers. University Bookstore will close in 10 minutes. Please begin
Go
making
and
your
buy
final
books.
selections. Thank you.
Well, you can come back. No, seriously.
Yes, if you're going to buy books, you have to buy them and pay for
Yeah,
them.
please, if anyone wants to purchase a book, now is the time. I'll be over here at the cashier.
I won't go anyplace. You can come back. Or if you mumble, we can murmur in
You
between.
keep talking.
Keep talking,
We don't
yeah.
have to stop
You can probably
talking.
hear us any place in the store, right? You don't have to be sitting here. Yeah.
I had another question. Any good Bob Guccione stories from Amiens?
I hardly met him. I met him once or twice.
He wasn't really
The
involved.
first time I went to his house, we had a party there, and he wanted to know what cyberpunk was, and I was very intimidated by Bob and Kathy, and I felt very much put on the spot, and I kind of murmured something. I don't know what but he was happy with what I said, so he was interested in that. He also, after Kathy died, he came to dinner. Harlan Ellison was in town, and Harlan and I and Keith Farrell, who was my boss at the time, and Bob and Bob's assistant Jane, we went to dinner at Sammy's Romanian. I don't remember much about it except it was fun, but I don't remember Bob talking at all. I don't think I ever had a conversation with him except about cyberpunk.
You see?
Which do you like better, cat stories or dog stories?
I love them both. I have not had very good luck with selling cat stories. My anthology, they did Twisted the Tail, which was my first horror anthology of cat stories. And it actually sold all over the world, but I don't know how well it actually sold in the United States. It was also orphaned 5 times, but that's besides the point. That means that your editor left, and you were handed on to 3 other editors in between before the book came out. And when I did Tales of Wonder and Imagination for Nightshade, I had a horrible time. I mean, it was supposed to be science fiction, fantasy, and horror. People who are cat lovers do not want to read about cats being hurt. So, no, seriously, I am a cat lover. I don't care. I love nasty cat stories as well as happy cat stories. They don't all have to be happy and have happy endings. If a cat dies, it dies, and it's a very powerful story, and I can accept that. But cat lovers, oh man, I got so many complaints on Amazon. And I did a guide in jest, partly. I put 3 dead cats, 4 dead cats, 5 dead cats. And 1 dead cat, no cat dies or is hurt. In 2 dead cats, a cat is hurt off stage. I mean, basically, it's like, but I love both. I mean, if it's a good story, I mean, I love Kid's story about that Terry and I published in Coyote Road. I mean, I love dog stories too. Captain Chip, or whatever. It wasn't called Captain Chip. Sergeant Chip. Yeah, I mean, I love dog stories. I grew up on dogs. Actually, I grew up on dog stories. I did not grow up in cat stories. Gray Fry's Bobby and stayed by his master's grave for 20 years and then died. I mean, I love dog stories. Malmo. I actually read it was either a comic book. It was a comic book, a graphic novel of dog stories. Malmo, the one who saved a city in Norway or something by carrying the medicine. I don't know. I mean, yes, I love dog stories. So, cat or dog, I don't care.
What about parrots?
I have no say about parrots. I do like, I like Kathy Goodin's Parrot Man, but I have no particularly, In fact, one time, I think I parrot sat for someone, or was supposed to feed the parrot while they were away. And my neighbor said, oh, and he never bites, he's really friendly. I have never met a parrot that didn't try to bite me. So that's what I think. So parrots, we don't get along.
You could do a lot of dead parrot stories.
That would be okay. I think they're pretty, but I won't go near them because they always want to bite me for whatever reason. Maybe they know I'm a cat person. I have no idea. Yeah, but parrots and me, parrots and I, see, that's an I, but not a me. Parrots and I don't get along. That's something I need to talk to you guys about tomorrow. The me and the I. Some people screw that up. No, not the parrots, the me and the I.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes the reason parrots bite is because they're used to interacting with other birds and they'll like bite each other's beaks and they don't realize that it hurts.
Yeah, they don't realize your
but-
finger is like
Yeah,
not a
no,
beak.
no, that's sometimes they're just mean. But
It was supposed to be a very nice parrot, but it didn't prove it to me.
but my question is, when you get when you are looking at stories for either an anthology or a magazine or what have you, do you read the story and are like, well, I like this or I don't like it, and you either accept it as it is or reject it as is, or do you look to be like, well, if the author is willing to make these edits, I might take it?
Yes, I mean, it depends totally on the story.
Right.
I'll know right away if I'm going to reject a story. If there's a story that's okay, I probably will reject it. If there's something, if the story really, I think is really, really good and needs work, I'll definitely work with the author on it. It's easier to do so if you've worked with them before, because then you know that they can either take editing or not. So when I edit someone who's new or I'm always try to be very careful the way I approach it. I'm not even talking about new writers, but just someone who I haven't edited before, who's been writing a long time. I don't want to offend them. I want to make sure that we're on the same wavelength. And basically, if I haven't worked with someone before, I will say, if you can fix this, if you do these, if we can work together, I'll probably take the story. If it's someone I have worked with, it's easy to say, yeah, we can get it together, we'll fix it, and I'll take it. So it depends, it depends on how much I like the story, and how much work I think it needs. There have been stories in the way long past where it was hopeless. What happened is there was something interesting about the story, and I tried to get the writer to work with me. We just couldn't do it. It just didn't work. He just didn't take the edit. We weren't on the same wavelength, and we both gave up on that. He sold it probably someplace else, but we just couldn't come to terms on what the problems were and how to fix it.
Do you see any secular change where the nature of the science fiction stories you're getting, the mix is really changing, or the nature of the horror is just changing over the years?
Well, I haven't been reading that many science fiction stories in the last few years, so that's hard to say. But what I do see is that there's a lot more mixes, what I call science fantasy. The science fiction that actually is fantasy, and the fantasy that's actually science fiction. I think, I can't even talk about science fiction. I just haven't read enough stories in the last few years. In horror, well, zombies won't go away for some reason. But I was really down on zombies. I was like, I never want to read another zombie story. But then there seems to be I'm not going to say a golden age of zombie stories. There seems to be more evolution in the zombie story that's becoming much more interesting. Not always, it's the same old crap, most of them. But there seem to be more interesting things happening that people are trying. People are using it like cyberpunk. Cyberpunk initially when it came out, being cyberpunk was good enough to make the story in a way, although the really good writers, had other things going on. But over time, cyberpunk became trappings, and there was nothing under it. But the good stories used the cyberpunk as background rather than the whole thing. And that's kind of what's happening with zombies, I think, sometimes. That the zombie, the existence of, or the post-existence after zombieism, is being used to explore society, and that's more interesting. I took a zombie story. No, that's not. There was a really good. Dan Chown wrote 2 really fantastic horror stories last year. One was a zombie story. That's the one I didn't take, and then there's another one with a post-apocalypse story that I did take. But, I mean, there are very interesting takes on zombies these days. But usually they're the same old crap, just like the same thing with vampires. It's mostly crap, and then there are some really good stories that, jump out at you.
So I noticed that people have gone from focusing on post-apocalyptic stuff, especially in film and TV, but also in writing. They've gone from post-apocalyptic to mid-apocalyptic.
Well, like dystopian,
Well, like World War Z, like the world's not over yet, but it's getting there. And so do you think we're going to move to pre-apocalyptic?
It's so nostalgic. It's all over the place, I couldn't even say. I don't know. When people say, what are the trends, I have no idea. I don't know a trend any more than you do. I look it back and say, that was a trend. Yeah, so I don't know what people will do. I think there's still a lot of interesting things that people can do with the dystopian or post-apocalyptic story. But again, it's like, if that's just what it's about.
Good evening, shoppers. University bookstore is now closed. Please bring your final selections to our cashier.
Dwayne, we don't have to leave yet, do we?
You'll get tomorrow at 9
Last
a.m.
chance to buy books? Go and buy them? All right, don't buy them. It's all right, okay, but you can stay. You can stay and hang out.
Yeah,
Okay.
if there were more questions, we can answer more questions, or we can go to autograph. Are there more questions? Go ahead.
What are some of the most common red flags that you run across that make you just drop the story and move on?
He's asking what are the most common red flags in a story that will make me stop reading. Bad writing. Seriously. I mean, if you... Or boring, really boring writing that doesn't do anything, that just sits there on the page and is like beige. And that's going to just not make them... Or some really obvious mistake. I mean, if you have a spelling error, a typo in the first paragraph, that's not good. I mean, it'll make me like, and not trust you. Because you should at least have someone take a look at that.
Because I'm horrible at grammar, so I have...
Grammar is, it depends on how bad it is. If there's I mean, people make grammatical errors and that's not crucial, unless it's really awful and consistently, happening.
Okay, in the back.
May I ask another?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
What do you think about science fiction and horror poetry?
I hate science fiction poetry, but horror poetry works. I think it's because, it's a reason. Science fiction is too solid. Science fiction is more, I haven't talked about this, so I'm just kind of like struggling here to, say what I'm trying to articulate it. Science fiction is more solid. Horror is more ethereal as far as it's a feeling, so you can write more. Poetry is about feelings and images. And I think it's much, I'm not saying all science fiction poetry stinks, but it's
most of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I mean, some people, Joe Haldeman has written very good science fiction poetry, but I think it's exceptionally hard because science fiction doesn't have the same feel as horror and dark fantasy or fantasy, and it's more, because it's so solid, I think it's harder to write poetically about it, if that makes any sense. And this is only me. I mean, other people might feel completely differently, and maybe I'm just missing the really good science fiction poetry.
Like it's anti-lyrical? Is that how?
I don't know.
Okay.
If you want to say that, sure.
Thank you.
Well, poetry doesn't have to be lyrical.
No,
But
it doesn't.
I think there's some feeling of an agenda to writing a poem in a setting that's science fictional that isn't there, even though poems have settings. But you have to think that through, and it may work against, in some way, work against the poetic impulse itself.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I think Tom Dish has written some science fiction poetry, but most of his poetry was not science fiction. And there's a reason, I think.
Thank you.
One more question? No.
Okay.
All right.
I was just waiting to see if someone hadn't asked one. How strict are you when you're looking at a story about if it falls into, say, science fiction or horror? Like if it's a scary story told in a spaceship?
It completely depends on what I'm reading for. If I'm reading for a horror anthology, If it's science fiction horror, it would have to be science fiction that's not highly technical, because it would clash with everything else in the book.
Mhm.
So it completely depends on what I'm reading for. I mean, for Tor.com, I can buy science fiction, fantasy, horror, and I love science fiction horror. But it has to be, you don't want to lose your audience, whatever that audience is. Once I used, for one of the fairy tale anthologies that Tara and I did, one of the adult ones, we actually bought a science fiction story that I thought worked perfectly. And that was the only time it ever happened. And, I thought it was real. And to tell you the truth, I don't remember anyone's comments on it. I don't remember if there were positive or negative reviews of it, but I thought that was the only time that ever happened that we did that, because it just seemed to work. And it didn't seem to clash with the rest of the book.
Thank you.
Well, I think one thing that often you don't realize when you're sending in stories is the editor's position. And your job is not necessarily to please the editor and to give the editor a story that they love. What the editor is looking for is a story that works in the market for the book or magazine that they're doing. So I would get some really great stories for the Infinite Matrix, and I couldn't necessarily publish all of them. I could be flexible about it because but it was a science fiction magazine website. And, readers have an expectation, and if you don't deliver on that expectation, the readers go away. You have an obligation to the readers who are putting out for the book to deliver on what you're offering them. So that comes into the process, rather than just, is this the kind of story I like? Is this story right for the market that I'm creating the book for?
Of course, there are times when the people who are buying books don't read the cover flap, and so they don't realize that there is science fiction, fantasy, and horror in the anthology or whatever, and they get really offended. It's like, why is that in there? It's like, well, it's not shown on the cover that that's what it's about. I mean, like people who bought Queen Victoria's Book of Spells and was disappointed it wasn't steampunk. Well, it says on the cover what it is, honey. If you read the cover, you'd know what it was about, kind of.
It said Victorian on the cover. Doesn't that mandate it by law to be steampunk?
No, it says about gas. It's called, the subtitle is something about Gaslight Fantasy. Or Gaslight, I can't remember which we ended up with.
Okay, thank you all very much. Ellen will be